So during the holidays, it's hard not to think about loved ones who have passed on, loved ones who have died. But I find it cathartic sometimes just to sit down and have a conversation with them. Like the other night, I went out in my shop and I opened up a couple of beers, one for me and one for my dad. See, my father passed away when I was 28 years old. He fell asleep while driving back from a fishing trip on the Deschutes, and he Thelma and Louised it off a cliff. Now, I know that's a terrible reference, but you get the idea. You get the visual. And my father and I, we were close. We were really close. The year before he died, we were fishing together 2-3 times a month. See, I just bought a house on the Klickitat River, and he was always coming up and fishing with me. So the other night, I go out in my shop, and I open up a couple of beers, one for him and one for me. And I sit down, and we just start reminiscing, talking old stories. I was like, hey, Dad, remember when I brought that live turkey to Thanksgiving? Do you remember how pissed Mom was? God, she was so pissed. And we started laughing and laughing. You see, one year I brought a live turkey to Thanksgiving. I told my parents that I'd bring the turkey to Thanksgiving that year, that I knew this awesome organic farm with awesome organic birds. And that part was true. That was true. But what I didn't tell him was that I was going to bring it alive. You see, Thanksgiving, it's the season of giving thanks. But it always seemed to me, that we never actually see what we're taking. You push your shopping cart through the supermarket and everything's wrapped in plastic, and we never actually see what we're taking. So I thought it was a great idea one year as a family if we could experience that together, to actually see what we were taking. I thought it was a great idea. Now, at the time, I was living out in La Grande. I was going to school at Eastern Oregon University, and I found out about this turkey farm a few miles outside of town. So I called up the turkey farm on the phone. This woman answered. She ran the farm, was the owner, wonderful woman. And I tell her about my idea. She's like, really? This is what you want to do? I'm like, yeah. Yeah, I was like, can you help me out? She's like, yeah, I can provide you with everything that you need. So, day before Thanksgiving, I drive out to this turkey farm and I get out of my truck and there's all these turkeys running around everywhere. It's a real free-range kind of turkey farm. And I get out of my truck and I go over and introduce myself to the farmer, say hello, and then she hooks me up with a full kit, everything that I would need. She gave me a big tom, a male turkey in this oversized dog kennel, this big metal pot, a scalding pot, a propane burner, a canister of propane, a hatchet, a chopping block, a big gunny sack with one of the corners cut out, a big cooler, a couple pairs of needle nose pliers, a knife, a rope, all the implements that I would need. Now understand, I did not come from a family of hunters. I'd never done anything like this before, nor had anyone in my family. So I told her this, and it's like, and I brought out a notebook and a pen because I needed some instruction. It's like, hey, could you lead me through the process? She's like, sure. So I kneel down and she just starts giving me instructions. Like, what do you do first? Uh-huh. What do you do next? Uh-huh. Leads me through the whole process. I was like, we get to the last step. I was like, that's it? She's like, that's it. It's like, all right. So I go over and I shake hands with her and I pay her and I tip her handsomely for all the extra time and information. And then I start loading everything up into the canopy of my pickup truck. But when I get to the turkey in the dog kennel, I ask her, I was like, hey, is this humane? It's like, this turkey is going to spend the next 16 hours in this dog kennel. Is this humane? She said, look inside the kennel. I've laid down a bed of straw. I've given it extra feed. There's water. She said, trust me. If this wasn't humane, I wouldn't let you do it. It's like, all right, set me at ease because I was a little worried about that. So I say goodbye and I drive back to my apartment. And at 6 o'clock the next morning, I start driving toward Portland, very suburban southeast Portland where I grew up. Now, of course, I needed a partner in crime on this whole thing. I couldn't pull the whole thing off by myself. So I had called up my older brother in advance, told him about my idea. And when he heard it, he's like, really? It's like, yeah. He's like, awesome. I'm all in. So he was in the know. He kept it a secret. But when I pulled up to my parents' house at like 10 o'clock in the morning or so, my brother's there, he's already there with his family, but he's looking out the window waiting for me. As soon as he sees me pull up, he secretly sneaks out of the house, helps me quickly unload everything out of the back of my truck onto the dog run on the side of the house. And we get all the gear unloaded, and we're standing there on the dog run. We got all the gear there, and we're having a little mini conference. It's like, what do we do first? It's like, well, we got to get the big scalding pot going. Got to get the big pot of water boiling. That's going to take the longest. So, all right, so we fill up the big pot full of water. There's a hose on the side of the house. And then we take the propane burner and the canister of propane, sneak that out into the backyard, set that up, run back to the dog run, grab the big pot of water, bring that into the backyard, run back to the dog run. What next? Like ice bath. Dump bags of ice into the cooler, fill that full of water, bring that out into the backyard. We're going back and forth. Now, at first, none of my family members are paying too much attention, but this wasn't a huge family gathering. The family members at this Thanksgiving were my 2 grandmothers, my great aunt, my younger sister, my older brother, his wife. They now had a 2-year-old daughter, myself, my girlfriend, and my parents, my mother and father. So it wasn't a huge gathering. But the last thing that I bring out is the turkey in the dog kennel. And I bring that out, set it down on the patio. Now family members are starting to pay attention. And this whole time, my mother, she's in the kitchen. She can't see anything, but mothers, they have a sixth sense about things. She knew that something was awry. So she washes her hands, walks out of the kitchen, comes over to the glass sliding door that leads to the patio, opens it up, sees my brother and I standing there. I'm like, hi, Mom. She's like, hi. Looks down, sees this big metal pot filled with water starting to steam. She's looking at that. Looks out in the grass, sees all these things laid out. And then she looks down and sees this dog kennel, and she's trying to piece it all together, but it doesn't quite click. So she walks down the steps, kneels down next to the dog kennel, looks inside, stands up and looks at me. She says, no, Ez, no, we are not doing this. We are not doing this. We're going to take this bird out into the woods. We're going to let it go. We're going to go to the store, buy a regular turkey. You're not going to turn Thanksgiving into chaos. No. It's like, Mom, it's okay. I get it. Most suburban mothers do not want a live turkey butchered in their backyard on Thanksgiving. I get that. But at the same time, taking this bird out into the woods, letting it go, and then going to the store and buying a turkey wrapped in plastic, well, that kind of defeated the whole purpose of my idea. I was kind of all in at this point. So I said to my mom, it's like, Mom, it's okay. It's like, if we're going to eat turkey, this is the process of things. We can do this. No! It's like, Mom, it's okay, really. It's going to be okay. No! Grabs my brother's 2-year-old daughter, her granddaughter, marches into the house, and she is just fuming. Fuming. She does not think this is a good idea at all. But the rest of my family, everyone else is kind of interested. And they've kind of formed a semicircle around my brother and me. So I go to the notebook, open it up. Step 1, grab the turkey by its legs, turn it upside down, feed the gunny sack over it, and get it so its head is poked out of the cutout corner. So I go and grab the gunny sack. I give that to my brother, and I kneel down next to the dog kennel, open up the door, and there's the big Tom looking at me. He's not really excited to see me. I reach inside and I start going for its legs. I grab it by its legs and I pull it out and turn it upside down. And sure enough, just like the turkey farmer said, the bird went docile, went limp. They're not used to being upside down. All the blood goes to their head. And my brother, he quickly fed the gunny sack over the bird, and we got it so its head was poked out of the cutout corner. And I kind of grabbed hold of the bird in a bear hug. And my brother, he goes out into the grass, and he lays down the chopping block, grabs the hatchet. He's going to do that part of it. So I carefully carry the bird out onto the grass, and I set it down, and I get on top of it. And I lay its head down onto the chopping block. And I'm looking at the bird, and it's looking at me. And I say to it, it's like, thank you. Thank you for what you're giving me and my family. And the bird's looking back at me like, this doesn't seem fair. It's like, I know, but thank you. And then my brother, he comes down with the hatchet. Whack! Off goes its head into the grass, and blood just starts shooting out of its neck. And the bird just starts pumping underneath me. I mean, pumping. It is way stronger than I thought it was going to be. And the blood is flowing, and the bird is pumping, and my family is watching. And at this moment, I can feel what I'm taking. I mean, I can really feel it. And it's a lot more than I thought. To be honest, it's a little overwhelming. And slowly, the bird stops moving, and the blood stops flowing, and I stand up off the bird, and I swallow the lump in my throat. And then I grab the bird by its legs, and I pull it out of the gunny sack, and I bring it over to the pot of the boiling water. And I dip it into the boiling water for 45 seconds, like the instructions said. Helps like release the feathers. And then I pull it out of the boiling water, and I bring it over to this low-hanging branch of a tree in the backyard. And my brother helps me tie up the legs to the branch so it's hanging upside down. And then my brother and I, we start just kind of stripping the feathers off with our fingers. We're standing side by side looking at each other like, whoa. And we take off all the feathers, except there's these little pin feathers, these short little stubby things kind of around the wing area. So I go and get the needle nose pliers. I grab those, and then we pull the pin feathers out one by one with the needle nose pliers. And now the bird's hanging there completely defeathered. So I untie the bird, and I pick it up, and I gently set it down on the grass, and then I go over and get the knife. And now here comes the icky part. You know, some of my family members turned away at this point. I don't blame them. So I kneel down next to the bird, and I just follow the instructions. You know, I slice up from the cloaca, basically the butthole of the bird, and I make a thin incision just under the skin, like 1/8 of an inch, because if you go in too deep, you're going to hit an organ and ruin all the meat. So I make a long, thin incision all the way up to the rib cage, and then I reach my hand inside the bird, and it's warm, and that part is really strange. You know, and there's a lot of smells, and I start, I reach my hand in, and I start pulling all the guts out and setting them on the grass, pulling the guts out. And pretty soon there's nothing left in the cavity of the bird. Then my brother, he comes over with the hose with the spray nozzle. We spray the bird off inside and out. And then I pick the bird up and I bring it over to the cooler with the ice water because it has to rest in an ice bath for an hour and a half before you put it in the oven. So I set the bird in the ice bath, and then I go and wash my hands. And then all my family members and I, we all get a drink in our hands, and we cheers. And it's meaningful. It's really meaningful. The only person not cheersing is my mother. She's still inside. She wanted to have nothing to do with it. So an hour and a half later, we pull the bird out of the ice bath, and my brother and I, we go get this big platter, and we set it on the platter, and now it resembles something that you would buy from a store. Very similar. You know, we didn't quite tuck the legs right, but very similar. So we bring the bird into the kitchen, and that's where my mother is. And when my mom sees it, now it's something she can recognize. It's something she's familiar with. She looks at it, she's like, okay. She accepts it. It's like, it's all right, Mom, it's all right. And together we start stuffing the bird like you would any other turkey. We salt the skin, put a little seasoning on top, and into the oven it goes. And several hours later, there we are, sitting around the dining room table, having Thanksgiving. And it's beautiful. And the turkey, it's delicious. So my dad and I were out in my shop reminiscing on this story. I was like, Dad. It's like, remember the prayer Mom gave that year? Do you remember that prayer? Felt a little more visceral than most years, didn't it? But it was a good prayer. It was a good prayer. I was like, Dad, remember when you went to work the next day? All your friends were telling their Thanksgiving stories, and you're like, yeah, hold on. I got one for you guys. Like, that was good stuff. It's like, Dad, I still remember the look you gave me that day when it was all going down. You looked over at me like, I'm kind of proud of you, but I'm also kind of concerned. It's a good look. It was a good look. I appreciated it. And I reached down and grabbed my beer, and my beer was empty. So I reached over and grabbed my dad's beer and started drinking his, Because you know dead people, they're terrible at drinking beer. And trust me, he did not mind. And my dad and I, we hung out for a little while longer, and then I said goodnight. It's like, all right, Dad, I love you. Talk to you soon. And I walked out of my shop, turned off the light, shut the door behind me, and walked into my house. Like I said, during the holidays, it's hard not to think about loved ones who have passed on. But sitting down and having a conversation with them, it can be a beautiful thing. And trust me, it's a lot more cathartic than you think.